Good morning, everyone. Hi, hello. My name is CJ, and I am back again with another narrated art time-lapse video. Simply because I feel really compelled to talk about this particular illustration. Most of the videos that I post on my YouTube are just pretty much just straight time lapses. Time lapses are great because you could learn a thing or two from it just by watching it, even without narration. But the ones with narration definitely is pretty interesting, especially since it gives a totally different dimension to the learning aspect of watching the video. So yeah, there are unfortunate things about narrated time lapses. Sometimes the artist just talks about stuff that you're not really super interested in. So I do try to limit talking just simply because of that. A classroom setting is definitely much more interactive than just say a video setting for learning aspects and whatnot. So yeah, you have the Q&A aspect versus me just narrating about what's going on and whatnot. Anyways, enough about the narration aspect of time lapses. I'm here with my voice. Yeah, what's up? Anyways, I feel compelled to talk about this simply because of the techniques I use in this particular illustration. It's not really complicated, but it is very involved. The particular prompt for this particular challenge that I found myself involved in is reflection. And so obviously my idea is of this particular scene where there's a reflection of this lady that's outside on the street, and you could tell that based on her reflection, she's happy about seeing something, and that something is actually a someone that was inside a cafe. So yeah, it's kind of like a cute romantic scene, I guess. You know, here's this girl who has a crush on a boy, and the boy just is kind of oblivious to her, I guess you could kind of say. And then she sees her crush at the local cafe, and she got excited. It's like, oh look, I could study with him, I could go into the cafe and study with him, and all that cute stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like the scene that I kind of pictured in my head initially, and I'm really happy with the way everything turned out. So yeah, I could talk some more about the composition and my ideas later on, because I typically give my critiques towards the end of the video. For now, the most important thing that I really wanted to talk about is the techniques. And the technique for reflection is actually very simple. Reflection for me is pretty much just another layer, another painted layer with opacity on it. I mean, that's the simplest way anyone could do a reflection, is basically on its separate layer, you just paint the reflection as it is, and then turn down the opacity so that the bottom layers painting could kind of show through. So this is what you would do for a window reflection, for a water reflection, especially for water reflections like a pond, you know, like if you want to see the fishes underneath, and then the reflection on top of that, you basically just paint the fishes on its own layer at the very bottom of the stack, and then on top of that you do the painting of the reflection, and then you kind of just turn it down, you just turn down the opacity on it, and then you could both see the fishes and the reflection. So that's it in a nutshell. It does get a little complicated if we were to try and honor, I guess, like the physical properties of reflection in itself. Like one of the things about reflection is that reflection typically just happens, especially in windows, right? It only happens at certain parts of the day, when the angle of the light hits the window in a certain way. So like early in the morning or late in the afternoon, the reflection is harder or like more opaque. In noontime, when the sun is high up and not really hitting the window, then the window becomes more transparent and you can see the inside more. So those are like some of the things that happens with reflection, right? And then anything that the light touches inside the interior space actually becomes more transparent rather than more opaque. And then anything that is shadowed or in the shadowy areas of the interior space, those becomes more reflective, I guess, as part of the window. I have a really nice description of the whole effect thing on krita-artists.org, which I'm going to link in the description of this video, so you guys could just see what my notes on those are. So yeah, I guess you guys could refer to that as well as this narrated video, basically. But that's it really for reflection. It's actually pretty simple, but you can get really nice, cool effects going if you pull it off right. So yeah, my technique is really more painterly. For the longest time, I really was trying to do more photorealistic stuff. I really want to push the realism in my paintings, and I've actually scaled down a lot on it. For now, I really like the painterly look, the more Americana, I guess, is like the best way for me to putting it. There's this segment in art history, like the Norman Rockwell era. There's an actual term, an art term for the Norman Rockwell era that I for the life of me, I could not think of what the art term is. But during that era, 1920s, 1940s, realism, like the way it was with French classical, wasn't practiced a lot. The art during that time was really more painterly compared to like studio work, like the way French classical was. French classical was very photorealistic, which is really interesting how French classical was photorealistic, especially for an era that barely had the camera in it. I mean, the camera was barely invented during the French classical era. So for the paintings to be super realistic as they were during that time, it was really interesting. And then things kind of scaled down in realism in a way. I mean, photorealism was still around. I mean, Don Eddy and Chuck Close was all practicing photorealism around 50s, 60s. So it wasn't like it died down. It was still there. But it was more painterly. Like, the more painterly artists were really the more well-known ones. Like, Norman Rockwell just keeps coming back to my mind. So yeah, and there's others there, like Andrew Wyatt. I think it was around that time. I could be wrong. I think it might be a little earlier. So anyways, my style has been more painterly, is what I was trying to get at. And this whole composition, this whole painting, this whole illustration is actually very more painterly than realism. But the reflection that I employed on it totally makes it like uber realistic. Like, I just love the way the reflections ended up on this, because it behaves like it would in real life, basically. And so I thought it was like super cool that I pulled this off. So yeah. But anyways, before I go on with my full critique, let me talk real quick about what has happened in the past few minutes, just to kind of gloss over about the steps and procedures. The very first thing that happened was that we saw Cascadeur, the program. I've been using Cascadeur's dummies to pose them real quick. So I love that program. That program is so super cool. It's so easy to pose compared to like a regular rig in Blender. I don't know how long I'm going to keep using it, just because my use case scenario for that program really is just for illustrations. I can't justify the expense of buying that software just to do dummies and poses, right? Like, I wish I could buy it, just because it's so easy to post things on it. But yeah, since I don't do animation, I might eventually let that software go. But I do love that software because it's so easy to post things on it compared to other 3D programs. So I did work in Cascadeur, found out that, I could not export it simply because of the limitations of my account. I ended up using Joseph Borg's dummy for Blender. You could download it from BlendSwap. Joseph Borg, I'm pretty sure that's the artist's name. He has this dummy that you could use and download and post. So I ended up using his artwork to post a few characters in Blender, and I recreated the scene. Basically in Blender, I recreated a scene with reflection, and I recreated a cafe scene, obviously without reflection. I rendered both of those scenes because I knew I was going to need 2 images, because eventually I was going to end up with 2 illustrations, one for the full scene and then one for the reflection. So I rendered those 2 scenes out in Blender just so that I could have a reference. And then obviously I imported them into Krita so I could do my line work and do the rest of my magic, I guess is the best way for me to put it. The last 5 minutes has just been me just meticulously doing a really nice clean sketch and sketching out the scene and whatnot. I really love a nice clean sketch. When I first started practicing speed paint, I kind of let clean line sketch go, just in favor of speed. I would just do quick sketches, 5-10 minutes tops, maybe 30 minutes at most, and then that's it. And I would just do all my work on top of that, or using those rough sketches. But eventually, after a few years of doing the speed paints, I just realized I just really miss nice clean line work. And so yeah, for this particular illustration, I took the time with it. I spent, I think, an hour to 2 hours just doing all this nice clean line sketch work. And then after that, I quickly did my coloring thing. My coloring is messy, and I intend for it to be like that. I've mentioned this so many times in my videos. The whole approach to coloring is just throw in some colors, but really concentrate on the values, because the values is far more important than the hue in itself. And the reason why I concentrate on values is because eventually I know I was gonna put everything in one layer anyways, and I'm gonna smudge all of them into a base layer that I could paint on, which I've done 2-3 minutes ago. I merged everything into one layer, smudged everything, and after I have this base layer, I slowly start doing my detailing, which is what you see me do right now. So right now, what we're taking a look at is just a very, very base layer, the full interior scene. It's super messy, it's super ugly looking, but at least I get the full view of what the scene would look like with the values and part of the hue. I mean, obviously some hues are wrong. The guy's face is a great example of the hue being wrong. That's his face is too yellow, for example, rather than it being skin-like color. It's more like yellow. Obviously that's kind of too alien, so it doesn't look right. So eventually I'm going to change all that when I'm detailing, but really I just needed to have some form of hues in it, as well as the value, just so that I could get a good overall idea of what the painting is going to be like while I'm doing my detailing work. So yeah, it's really been my technique that has kind of evolved over time. Now, typically I paint in one layer. That's it. I just paint in one layer, and then all the other added layers, or all the layers that I add towards the end of the illustration, I take it back. Let me go back a step. At the very beginning, I have multiple layers. I have tons of layers, tons of effects that I throw in there, all done quickly. I merge all of these layers into one that I would eventually start my detail work on, which is what the case is here. And then towards the end, I would add 1 or 2 layer to do some color corrections and some light edits. So At the end of my illustration, I might have like 2 or 3 layers at most, with the majority of the painting in one layer. That's typically my approach. Obviously, since I'm doing a reflection and I needed to have like another illustration in its own little layer thing, I eventually ended up with multiple layers than I normally would have. So I have that separate illustration in its own layer. It has transparency edits on it to kind of account for the more realistic aspects of the reflection. It has a transparency mask, it has opacity settings, and then on top of all that, I copied the guy back on top of this reflection later, because the guy was slowly disappearing amongst all the reflection. So I recopied another layer of him on top of all the reflections, just to kind of bring him back up front again. So that's basically just my layers set up for my illustration. So yeah, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and be be quiet for now and just let you guys just watch the rest of me detailing this piece. I'm gonna come back towards the end of the video and just kind of give my final thoughts on this whole illustration. right, I'm gonna go ahead and pipe back in with my commentary, and talk real quick about my own self-critique of this piece. I love this piece. I really thought that this piece was super awesome and super cool. I'm all about narrative illustrations. That's kind of been my thing for a while now. Every time I draw something or I paint something, I try to have some form of storytelling aspect to the picture. Even with character design, like I've been doing character design challenge for a good 2-3 years now, and as much as I can, I try to throw like a narrative story to the illustration. Now, most of the characters that I've done for character design challenge, they're all placed in a studio setting, so it's just very plain background. But if I can get away with it, I will have some form of storytelling aspect to it. It's just been my thing. Which brings me back to this illustration. I just love the storytelling aspect of it. There were a few accidents that happened in this particular illustration that I thought was really, really cool. So one of the things that I knew I wanted was that the reflection of the girl be pretty much right on top of where the guy is. Like I wanted them to be that close compositionally. What I didn't expect was how close faces are. I mean, Jim Plex in krita-artists.org mentioned that, like, he loves how close the faces are, and I totally agree. I love that her face is pretty much right next to his face in that reflection, and that her eyes pretty much direct you towards to where the guy is sitting. So it's like, I mean, your eyes will automatically just gravitate towards the guy, even if the guy is somewhat obfuscated or somewhat hidden by the reflection. Just the fact that her eyes are looking towards him, kind of just, you'll see him basically. It's like it's hard to miss him, even though he's semi hidden by the reflection. So yeah, I love that aspect of it. I love that accidental nature of it. So yeah, I thought that was super cool. Aside from that, like all the techniques that I employed on this particular painting, I love how the way they came out. I think the last time I was super involved with reflection was with an illustration I did for character design challenge. It was like a Marvel fan art or a Marvel character redesign. And I'm not sure if it was a Marvel redesign or if it was an X-Men redesign, but I knew that I did Rogue as my redesign, and that one did not come out as well as this one. So if you were to compare the two of them, this one was definitely more successful in terms of reflection and the realistic nature of the reflection. So yeah, I love this piece. So I'm in love with it. What can I say? I thought I did a really good job with it. So yeah. But anyways, this is almost the end of the illustration. I just really want to say that I hope you guys learned a thing or two from it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this with me. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Good night.